Is Professor James Leckman, who is the Neison Harris Professor of Child Psychiatry, Psychology and Pediatrics at Yale, and for more than 20 years he served as the Director of Research for the Yale Child Study Center. One of Dr. Leckman's long-standing research interest has been the interaction of genes and the environment in the pathogenesis of Tourette syndrome and obsessive-compulsive disorder. I can speak volumes about Professor Leckman's contribution to science, to mental health of children. But most recently, he has been our leader in conducting research on whether strengthening families and enhancing child development has potential as a path to peace and violence prevention. Professor Leckman.
When we hear about the many conflicts in the world, and thank you, Christian, for your presentation, and the need to somehow find a way to support children in the time of crisis, how to support children becoming more resilient in the face of catastrophe, in the face of major losses, what can we do? What can we do? And frankly, if you were to ask me, what are some of the things that have made a difference in the lives of some of the individuals that have emerged as the most resilient in the face of conflict? I would say, let's take a look at what was going on very early in their development. Let's take a look at who their parents were and how their parents actually invested in them. And when we talk about education, what I'd really like you to think about is not just the education in school or in the safe spaces that have been created by UNICEF and others. But what about the education of the parents? What about bringing together groups of parents together? And we'll hear from Siobhan in just a few minutes about how things like this have really made a difference in areas of conflict, like in Ireland. And it's just fascinating for me to be part of this discussion and dialogue. Because one of the things that science teaches us, and one of the things that's evident when you look through the various articles that are included in this issue of the journal, is that early childhood matters. Early childhood makes a difference. And potentially, this can be transformative and it can be transgenerational in its effects. I'm still waiting for the question about the issues of conflict and the rest of it. On the other hand, I am convinced that if we can, in safe places, engage parents in a discussion about how to invest and be responsive parents, how to engage the child as early as possible in pro-social activities and acceptance, how we can engage children and parents in terms of looking at the importance of, we love reading, whatever it might happen to be. We can make a difference in this world, and it can be transgenerational, and if that's true, it can be transformative. Some of this, and I'll just emphasize this a little bit, this is a little bit of science talk, I apologize, but how many of you have heard about epigenetics? Hey, okay. Thank you, I'm delighted. Dr. Mayor, that you are familiar with it. I became fascinated with this area, and I can tell you about how I got involved in parenting, and we've been studying the brains of new fathers, the brains of new mothers, what the hormonal systems are. I do have a picture in the handout of my daughter and my first grandson is here. And one of the things that we've been learning is that, of course, the same biobehavioral systems are present throughout of the sort of mammalian kingdom that we have, or queendom as it might happen to be in terms of the importance of mothers. But one of the things that we've realized is that if you look at the programming of brain development, what happens early in utero, what happens early in terms of the very earliest years, make a tremendous difference in terms of the potential that can be realized with regard to the children's brain and their engagement with others and in the environment. It matters. It matters. And the epigenetic story is that for years, of course, we've been fascinated about the human genome. We finally got that sequenced a few years ago, and then we started looking at the junk DNA, all of the rest of it that somehow wasn't involved in coding. But what did we realize? We realized that that junk DNA actually was very important, that it actually had the regulatory regions that control the expression of some of these genes. And we realized that the environment in which those animals or those humans were raised had a big impact in terms of when, where, and how various genes were expressed in the developing brain. Some of the first people who did work on this were up in Canada, and I'm thinking now of Michael Meany and Moshe Ziff. And basically what they were looking at, and I apologize, I'm going to talk about rats for a minute. And they were looking at rats, and they looked at how much licking and grooming the rat mother did. And they found some rat mothers that licked and groomed a whole lot, and they found some other rat mothers that hardly licked and groomed at all. And then they looked at the next generation, and it turned out for sure that if you were a high-licking, grooming mother, your pups, when their turn came to be new mothers, were high lickers and groomers. And the opposite was also true. And then the paper that actually got published in Science back in 2000, whatever it was, they looked at cross-fostering. What if I take a pup from a high-licking and grooming mom and put it with a low-licking and grooming mom? What's the outcome? Is it sort of in the middle? Is it sort of more like the biological mom? Or is it? Turns out that nurture matters. And when they looked at the biological mechanism that was involved, it had to do with the decorations on the genome, not the actual sequence of the gene. And that's basically this little tail right here. And you can see some DNA wrapped around some histones here. But basically, how you were raised as a child is going to have a big impact on how you raise your children. If you do a good job in being a parent, your children will be even better parents. Your children, even in the face of adversity, in the face of conflict, will be more resilient. And there's longitudinal, prospective longitudinal data. I can tell you all about it. There are two other things I just want to mention, and then I'll sit down because I know we don't have much time. One is that parenting programs matter. We'll hear more about it from Siobhan. I can also tell you that what we need to do is work together. We need to form partnerships. We need to find programs that work, that can be adapted to environments, and to make it really make sense and happen. And we're actually working right now, thanks to Pia and others, with colleagues in Beirut, Lebanon, and some of the Palestinian refugee camps there, implementing some programs and doing a really serious evaluation of it. But one of our partners has been this Acha Foundation in Turkey. And one of the things that brought me to Istanbul a few years ago was that they wanted to talk to me about all of the stuff I knew about the biology of parenting, what goes on in the brains of fathers, what goes on in the brains of mothers. And they wanted to know what I thought about what they had observed in some of the programs they had been doing with fathers, where they brought groups of fathers together. And even though they came from different backgrounds in terms of religious and ethnic backgrounds, they became friends. They were sharing together this curriculum in terms of parenting and fatherhood, and they became friends. Is that possible? And the concept and paper that they prepared that they wanted me to discuss with them was the one, Building a Generation of Reconciliation, the role of early child development in peace building. And here are some of the folks that were actively involved in the preparation of that. And this is one of the very few programs that have actually been evaluated over 21 years to see what the outcomes are in the kids who've actually been involved in the program. And indeed, they had higher rates of educational success, higher rates of success in society in terms of marriages and the rest of it, fewer criminal behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm about to go off to Cambridge next week, where UNICEF, the WHO, and the University of Cambridge are involved and UBS Optimus in Switzerland, who's actually providing some of the support for the work that we do in Beirut, are going to be talking about violence prevention. And if we do a good job in terms of parenting interventions, is there a way in which this is actually going to reduce violence? And I guess I'm convinced that if we do a good job with the parenting interventions, particularly if it's effective in terms of working together with the community, the people who are being served, working together with the individuals in the ministry, so it's their program as well as your program, working together with professionals, we can truly make a difference. And I just think that let's do what we can. The work that everyone is doing around the tables here is really so impressive, and I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you for all the work and effort that you're doing. And what I'll end is saying that although biology can teach us a lot, there's still a great deal that we don't know. And I think some of the issues that were being brought up by Rima and by Christian and some of the others are really fundamental. But I am convinced from what I have seen in these programs that this can help build social capital. It can actually sort of enhance the role that women play within the families in some of the traditional cultures where that's not usually the case, where it makes a difference in terms of the kind of parenting that is being offered so that you're actually investing in the child, you're becoming more responsive to that child's needs rather than sort of letting them grow up before you can talk to them or whatever the case may be, and that the outcomes are likely going to be much more successful. So I'm convinced that this is what we need to be doing, and we need to take action in whatever way we can to move forward that agenda. So I guess I'll just end with a few of the quotes that I have, some of that are pretty much irresistible. So here's one from Mahatma Gandhi. If we are to teach real peace in the world, if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. Here's one from Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And I would say, it's not just putting the child in a classroom. It's actually helping the parents become more responsive. And if we do that, we're going to be taking action to actually make this a less violent world. We're going to be taking action to those children that are exposed to conflict and violence and the rest of it, they can become more resilient if they have that kind of resource deep inside of them from the way in which they were raised as children. So thank you. There is one other thing, although I think Rima's going to talk more about it. It turns out the earlier you intervene, the more cost-effective it is in terms of sustainable development. And thanks to Rima and Catherine Cantor-Brick, a new book is coming out. We'll be launching it here at the United Nations, the Ernst Gutmann Forum, and basically asking the question, what is it that we don't know, and does it make sense that parenting interventions can actually lead to a more peaceful world? And a number of people, Mohammed was there, Rima was there, Pia was there, a number of individuals. Catherine Cantor-Brick is one of the major organizers. So I look forward to the launch of that, and I guess it's going to be in November sometime. But thank you.